You don't have productivity problems. You have a brain that is chemically wired to quit before you finish your task. And that pattern is silently killing your chances of success. This pattern is identical in nearly every entrepreneur I've worked with. You start strong, you create momentum, you make real progress, and right when you are about to finish the task, something shifts. Everything suddenly feels heavier and you get distracted. What was once exciting becomes something to actively avoid. This is what I call the execution drop-off, and is the hidden killer of your entrepreneurial potential. What fascinates me is that this pattern does not discriminate by talent or ambition. I've worked with founders making 10K a month up to closing 9-figure exits, and I've seen this pattern affect everybody. Talent, hard work, IQ become irrelevant if your brain checks out at the finish line. Let me share you a real example of this. A client came to me after being stuck at 40K a month for 2 years. Why? Because everything he tried, a new funnel, team restructuring, launching new offers, would take forever to complete. And when he finally launched it, he did so without polishing the details. He had plateaued not because of the market, but because of what was happening in his brain. And here's what most people get wrong. The average self-development guru will tell you that you need willpower to succeed. And if you quit midway, you are weak. But that is not the case. Neuroscience tells a different story. Your brain is literally programmed to quit before you finish your tasks. You have this neurochemical in your brain called dopamine. But it is not what they've been told you it is. It's not a pleasure chemical. It is a wanting chemical that drives you to pursue rewards. And it is not released when you complete tasks. It is released in anticipation of rewards and novel experiences. So when a task drags on, novelty decreases and your brain secretes less dopamine. And when you hit the 90% completion mark, your brain sees more reward in opening Instagram or YouTube than in actually finishing the project. The technical term for this is reward prediction error, which occurs when the anticipated reward no longer justifies the effort required. This explains why starting anything is easy. There's high novelty and high dopamine, but finishing actually becomes torture because there's low novelty and insufficient dopamine. And this is just not distraction. It is chemical sabotage. And it has nothing to do with procrastination, because procrastination is stalling before a task due to a subconscious fear of failure. The execution drop-off is a dopamine trap that prevents you from finishing what you have already started. And this costs you dearly, because every time you stall at 90% mark, you just don't lose the benefits of finishing. You lose momentum, you lose clarity, you lose the compounding returns of that execution. But the real tragedy lies deeper. You may stay stuck for 2 years like the client I told you about. But over time, that can become your identity. Being brilliant but inconsistent, smart but distracted, capable but capped in your potential. I realized the first time I realized this like 7 years ago in a software founder who had crazy ideas all the time. I was working as a VC director back then, and every time we talked to the guy, he had a new feature. He was about to launch, about to sign a new partnership. Everything was about to happen, but never actually happened, because at the last minute, he would change the coding. He would renegotiate the deal. I didn't know it back then, but now I know today that he was permanently stuck in the execution drop-off, to the point that it had become his identity. If you don't fix this pattern at the root, you're just not wasting time. You're training your brain to be fundamentally unreliable and thus incapable of meaningful success. And ask yourself, do you think elite performers are different from you? No, they're not more intelligent, they don't work harder, they're not more talented. They just have a mind that works for them because the brain is actually chemically aligned. When average performers constantly fight their brain chemistry, elite performers train their minds and structure their systems to make finishing inevitable. The solution goes beyond superficial productivity. It requires a systematic approach to mental rewiring. Here's a 4-step framework we use with our clients to streamline their ability to finish what they start. First, we rewire their identity around mastery. Average performers build their identity around outcomes. I am someone who achieved this, who have this. If you depend on outcomes, at some point you'll sabotage. Elite performers build their identity around process. I am someone who shows up every single day and does excellent work. This process-based identity expands the dopamine window and keeps you emotionally attached to tasks, even when they are boring. In fact, myself, when I shifted from I'm building a 7-figure performance centers for entrepreneurs to I am someone who delivers exceptional work every single day, my business exponentially scaled. That's step 1. but it's not enough. Step 2 is to raise stakes, is to train your brain to care when it naturally wouldn't. And you do that by consistently architecting urgency because it spikes dopamine. We do that with arbitrary deadline, creating internal pressure through visible, public, or private commitments to finishing the task that create that urgency in the brain. Step number 3 is dopamine sequencing. This is where we get tactical. Elite performers are very good at breaking down long-term projects into short, novel, high feedback loop micro missions. So instead of, for instance, writing the copy of your website, you create the conversion narrative for the hero. Or instead of just having a place where you work, you change your work environment daily to create new sensory experiences. In fact, I do have 2 offices. This is my home office and I have an office in Brickell, and I'm changing every couple of days to keep things fresh in my mind. You can also use progress bars or public milestones to create completion metrics. The goal here is to trick the brain to believe that something new is happening, and this approach introduces novelty and urgency. And finally, structure your day the right way. Use ring fencing session. It's not about motivation. It's about creating systems that make deep work inevitable and you actually look forward to completing them. A ring fence session is the Selfmastered framework for a 90-minute deep work block with explicit constraints. Within those 90 minutes, you use countdowns, deadlines, and public commitments to making the clock the trigger for dopamine, not the task. And that is how you start associating dopamine with the structure that you set, not with the simulation. If you do this right, over time, you'll notice longer focus windows, faster recovery from distractions, and significantly less resistance to tedious but essential work. In fact, research from the University of California found out that only this approach, that they call temporal containment, can increase productivity up to 43%. If you want to know how we help our founders actually unlock their full potential with proven science, download the Neuro Execution Protocol below. It breaks down the exact protocols we use to help entrepreneurs unlock and sustain peak performance. Now, here's the truth that I want you to understand. Elite founders don't have more willpower than you. They simply have learned to rewire their minds to do what needs to be done and have a mind that works for them. They learn to surf the waves of dopamine rather than drowning in them. They build systems that make finishing inevitable. Remember the guy that I told you about, that he had been stuck in 40K a month for 2 years? Within 3 months, he was doing 65K a month, I think. And when I asked him what changed, he succinctly told me, my mind is not fighting me anymore. I just feel like I am in control. Why? Because he deployed a whole arsenal of protocols and he rewired his mind with our stuff to actually break through that plateau that he had created for himself. The uncomfortable truth is that you can hustle your way to burnout, but if you do not rewire how your brain works, you'll keep waking up with a full calendar and no forward motion. You'll look like a founder, but operate like a frazzled operator stuck in purgatory. That is what we fix in Selfmastered. The core root of every productivity and performance problem is mental friction, and that thing is rewritable. We can help you do that in about 6 weeks if we move fast. Because knowing what to do means absolutely nothing if your brain doesn't let you do it. The entrepreneurs who win aren't just the ones with better ideas or more hustle. They're the ones who have learned how to finish what they start, how to make their minds work for them, and how to execute consistently until they become successful. Book your call below.